to order, please. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing because following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a moment of silence and a moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will have the reading of the notice, please.
The educational and annual meeting and budget hearing of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, on Thursday, November 5th, 2020 at 7 p.m., and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. And I would like to request everyone here put their electronic devices and cell phones on silent or vibrate as to not interrupt the meeting. And I also would request all of the supervisors to keep your mics on mute, and any people that have joined the meeting by phone, also mute your phones as to not to interrupt the meeting. If you request to speak, you'll be recognized by the chair. Thank you, and we'll proceed to roll call, and I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Beestrom.
Here.
Bizotto. Boots. Book.
Here.
Butke.
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
Seiler.
Here.
Conway.
Here.
Dickinson.
Here.
Drabeck.
Here.
Pfeifferich.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Gaber.
Here.
Gibbs.
Here.
Gonering.
Here.
Gild.
Here.
Gums.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Jacobson. Johnson.
Here.
Krause. Lamont.
Here.
Longenhan.
Here.
Leahy.
Here.
Lowe. Mask.
Here.
McEwen.
Here.
Here.
Oberbeck.
Here.
Opal. Robinson.
Here.
Rosenberg. Schley.
Here.
Seefelt.
Here.
Soibert. Stark.
Here.
Van Cray.
Here.
Vol.
Here.
Zhang.
Here.
Bizotto.
Here.
Here.
Opal. Soibert. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to welcome all of the visitors that we have this evening. Also the viewing audience, the visitors, and also the general public that has joined the meeting either by WebEx or by phone. And so I want to thank them. And we will move on to the 15-minute public comment. This is not the testimony that we will take during the public hearing on the budget. This is the public comment portion on anything on the agenda. And there was no one that had signed up and no one had approached me to sign up for the public comment portion. And so we will move on to the budget hearing. Items B8, the administrator's budget message was documented and is on the county website. The agenda also has a link directly to the budget message. This year, we are doing things a little bit differently. The budget message and presentation was presented to the board at the last board meeting last month. It was recorded, and it was provided as a link on the website to anyone that wished to view that budget message, along with a written copy of the budget message. So, we tried to, out of respect for the public, last year's budget hearing went extremely long. We were here in excess of 4 hours, and we didn't get to the public comment section on the budget until almost 11 o'clock. So we've moved things around. We've changed the way that the budget message was presented. Again, it was presented to this board last month. It's also provided as a link on the website, Marathon County's website, and also there's a link to the actual video of the presentation of the budget by the administrator. Again, it was done to try to facilitate and accommodate the public, because we did, in fact, have some citizens that were unable to stay around. They had children, and they had to not be able to provide public comment to this board. So out of respect for the citizens and the time of the supervisors, we presented that budget last month. So at this point, we will proceed to the public hearing, but before that, I would invite the chair of the HR Finance Committee, if there's anything else that he would like to speak about the budget before we open the public hearing to listen to the public.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I think you did a good job of explaining why we changed the process in order to enable citizen participation earlier in this meeting. And I don't have anything to add, but I do appreciate the effort made by Administrator Leonard and our Finance Director, Christy Cordes, and their staff in developing this, and remind the supervisors that if they have a budget amendment or a change, to please get that to Finance Committee, which will be considering them on Tuesday before the board meeting. And we've got forms that if you need for the amendments, please contact Christy, Lance, or myself. So again, thank you, Lance, or Administrator Leonard and Christy, for your efforts in putting this together.
Thank you, Chairman Robinson. And I too would like to express my sincere thanks to not only the administrator, but his whole team, along with all the department heads who not only worked tirelessly on this budget, but in some cases had to do the budget twice. And that was also explained in the budget message last month. So with that, we will have the public reading of the proposed 2021 budget by the clerk.
Marathon County Notice of Public Hearing, Consolidated 2021 Proposed Budget Summary. Residents and taxpayers will take notice that the Marathon County Board of Supervisors has arranged for a public hearing on the 2021 tentative budget to be held in the Marathon County Assembly Room at the Marathon County Courthouse, Wausau, Wisconsin. An official public hearing is scheduled for Thursday, November 5th, 2020 at 7 p.m., with final approval on Tuesday, November 10th, 2020 at 7 p.m. The public hearing will be for the benefit of Marathon County taxpayers who desire to be heard. The following is a summary of the tentative 2021 budget. Public inspection of the detailed report may take place at the office of the county clerk or the finance department. Proposed for 2021. Tax levy is $51,942,105. Mill rate is $4.533. Equalized value is $11,458,840,600.
Thank you. And just a little bit of housekeeping before we start taking input from the public. I would invite any of the public to testify. I would like to have each individual identify themselves by name and address. And then I would request that everyone, so that we can accommodate all of the public that wishes to address the board on this budget subject, to be succinct. And if somebody else has already expressed your views, by all means, if you have something to add, by all means add those comments. But if they are exactly the same as someone else, I would request that you not duplicate those comments, but say that you're in concurrence with the other speakers, and so that we can accommodate anyone and everyone that wishes to address the board during this public comment period. So, and I will call on any individual that has requested or wishes to address the board at this time. So any of the individuals in the public that wishes to address the board on the proposed budget.
I would, Chairman Gibbs.
And please, name?
Teresa Whetstone.
Teresa
My address is
Whetstone Teresa Whetstone is recognized. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My address is 237133 North Troy Street in Wausau. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the elected district attorney for Marathon County. I was born and raised on a dairy farm just outside of Marathon. I returned to Marathon County as a prosecutor in 2002 and was elected to serve as Marathon County District Attorney in 2016 and just reelected in 2020. My husband and I are raising our 4 daughters here, ages 7 to 19. So my comments come to you tonight as a member of the public and as your elected district attorney. My comments also have a sense of urgency. I am elected to run the county office that is at the heart of Marathon County's goal to be the safest, healthiest, and most prosperous. And that's an honor to hold that position, but it's also a tremendous responsibility. Our office is solely responsible for the prosecution of crime in Marathon County. Our 12 prosecutors review approximately 5,000 cases every year to determine if there's a crime to charge and what that crime should be. They are responsible to know every part of that case, the criminal history of the offender, the wishes of the victim, and the law. There is no excuse for not honoring the constitutional rights of offenders or victims. Whatever comes into our office from law enforcement, we must handle. There is no overflow valve. There is no one else who can help out when we've reached capacity. We are it. The prosecutors in our office have been critically understaffed for nearly 20 years. We also have one of the lowest staff-to-attorney ratios in the state and one of the lowest victim-witness specialist staffing levels in the state. Of the approximately 5,000 cases that come into our office each year, for our 12 attorneys, right now we have 15 pending cases of separate cases of either attempted or completed first-degree intentional homicide. The evaluated caseload for our prosecutors by the state says that we are 6 prosecutors short, or 7,185 hours of work every year short. Combine that with our understaffed legal assistants to support those attorneys and our understaffed victim witness to honor the rights of crime victims, and we are a perfect storm for mistakes, omissions, and injustice for victims and offenders. These levels of understaffing are inconsistent with a county that is working to be the safest, healthiest, and most prosperous. Last year, the staffing deficits were highlighted in an Administrator Carter's budget message, and I won't read those to you because obviously those are available to you online and can be found in his budget message, but recognize the understaffing both in our legal assistant area and our prosecutors. And also commented on how what was provided to our office last year by upgrade of a legal assistant to a paralegal and converting our receptionist to a victim witness person did not take care of the understaffing issues. In 2021, current budget message also addresses our understaffing. So it's undisputed that your Marathon County District Attorney's Office is understaffed. The difference between last year's budget and this year's budget is that last year we were 5.7 prosecutors short, and the state analysis this year is that we're 6.18 prosecutors short. And since last year's budget, Marcy's Law, which is the constitutional amendment for victims, took effect in May of 2020 with no resources attached to it. This affords victims of crimes constitutional rights at the point of victimization. This means more victims have a constitutional right to be heard in all court proceedings. So many of the proceedings that our attorneys were doing off the record are now at scheduled court appearances, limiting even more the time our attorneys have to prepare in their offices. We are also having another branch of court added to Marathon County in the summer of 2021. This court will be also handling criminal cases and will be another area that our attorneys have to staff. So I have a sense of urgency that was there last year and is only heightened this year. Now the budget that is put forth has body cameras for the Marathon County Sheriff's Office added to it. So in addition to the understaffing and the workload, now we will have recordings from the Marathon County Sheriff's Office and all of the referrals, the hundreds of referrals that they send to the District Attorney's Office. Each one now will have a body camera recording that our prosecutors are responsible to know the content of, be aware of, be able to locate, be able to download, be able to provide. So when I had a sense of urgency when I submitted in a timely fashion our position requests, I did not know at that time that the body cameras were going to be added, but now I do, and my sense of urgency is turning into a sense of panic. For those of you who don't know, we have kept our court system going remotely through the pandemic. The only thing we can't do is jury trials, and those are starting to commence. The first one is set for December 4th. For anybody who doesn't think that our courts are going to be up and running next year, they are wrong. We have already set a month-long trial in the month of May, starting May 17th. We have a 3-week trial in February. We have another month-long trial set at the end of August. And that means 2 staff members, 2 attorneys are going to be tied up in those trials. And the rest of the staff members will also have other smaller trials going, plus all the cases that are coming to be reviewed for charging. It is just a perfect storm. So last year at budget time, there was, because those positions were not a part of the budget, there was an effort to make an amendment to the budget. And I want to be perfectly clear that there was a proposal for StartRight at that time to take the money from there to fund the positions that the District Attorney's Office was requesting. That was not my suggestion. What happened was county board members saw the need, saw it as a priority, and tried to find a funding source for those positions. And that was, StartRight was highlighted in the budget, so that was suggested. And my concern is that there is a recognition that this is a priority. It's unacceptable to have this deficit in our District Attorney's Office for staffing, and county board members are trying to find a place for funding to come from those positions. And so they're picking things that are visible because, frankly, the county board members don't know what we are funding, what kind of programs we are funding, what kind of non-mandated programs we are funding. So when I came before you last year, I said, some of these programs that we're doing, I have to take a look at them and see if we have the staffing or resources to continue, if it makes any sense given our limited resources to continue. One of those programs I looked at was the Safe Streets program that has been funded by Marathon County since 1998. We put $118,000 into that program every year. And not once has there been an outcome measure demanded of that program to see if it actually reduces recidivism in drunk driving for second and third offenders or reduces operating after revocation. And yet, despite the fact that that program has not been evaluated for its productivity to see if it really enhances public safety in Marathon County, that program was funded again in this year's budget. And yet, I can't seem to get that I'm told there's no money available for our positions in the district attorney's office, which there's no dispute we need. There was also a statement made last year that our prosecutors are state-funded or state positions, and therefore it's a state's responsibility, and I understand and appreciate that argument. But I want to point out that Marathon County supplements the state in various ways, and one of them is in our criminal justice system. In OWI court, fifth and sixth offenders, we put $165,000 of tax levy money into OWI court every year, and that is to serve fifth and sixth offender OWI offenders. So those offenders, if they were not put in OWI court, would be in prison. Prisons are state funded. In prison, they would be able to get access to state prison treatment programs, and when they're released, they would be supervised by the state of Wisconsin Department of Corrections on the state's dime in the community. Marathon County felt that that wasn't sufficient treatment for those offenders, and they are put under probation supervision, and Marathon County supplements the state because they feel it's inadequate for these offenders at a tune of $165,000 a year, keeps them out of prison, and supervises them with a case manager in addition to their state Department of Corrections worker, and that is a choice Marathon County made to supplement the state's deficiency in what they perceive to be inadequate treatment in prison. So to say that there's a line in the sand that it's the state's responsibility when it affects Marathon County citizens and public safety, it is all of our responsibility. And I guess I had concern about making a statement tonight because many of you heard me last year, and I have to. This urgency that is the reality of my everyday in the district attorney's office and the magnitude of what we're dealing with. There is no choice but to look at other programs that Marathon County funds. And if they are non-mandated programs and they are not producing, it's not about pitting programs against each other. It's about making tough budget decisions to fund the things that are an absolute necessity. Someone made the analogy of you can't pull a brick out of the wall because the wall might come tumbling down. Well, the district attorney's office is a support beam for the criminal justice system. You cannot keep piling on that support beam because eventually that support beam is going to fall and the whole structure will come down. And that is unacceptable. And it's my duty to bring this to the board and make sure it stays in the forefront and to your attention. And I appreciate your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional individuals, any additional public that wishes to address the board? Any additional individuals wish to address the Marathon County Board of Supervisors on the budget? Again, I will ask, is there any of the public that would like to address the board on the proposed 2021 Marathon County budget? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and we will move on. Budget discussion by board members. Discussion by board members regarding the proposed 2021 budget. Discussion. Anybody have questions or concerns about the proposed budget? Supervisor Krause.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I feel saddened on hearing what Teresa Wetson has told us. Last year, I did vote for more employees for their department, and I think it is imperative that we have a good justice system. There may be more problems in the future because of COVID and vandalism and things like that and crimes. So I think it's imperative that we try to find something somewhere in the budget where we could at least add 1 or 2 more employees to help them out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, this is Supervisor Langenhoff.
Supervisor Dickinson first, and then Supervisor Longenhahn next. Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to thank Mrs. Wetston for speaking with us tonight. I did have a couple comments on that. I brought that up at our last meeting. Just that we're adding a 6th justice, which could open a door to more cases. And that would add to the caseload, which would be a concern. A second issue is we talked about a system approach to criminal justice last time. In my opinion, that fails if we can't evaluate and prosecute cases and afford the accused due process and the victim's family justice. And then third in that is a state issue does become a local issue if the state is not following through on their end. And so I certainly appreciate the comments that were said before, and I do support funding the staff in the prosecutor's office. Thank you.
Thank you. I would remind all the supervisors they have an opportunity to offer an amendment. However, they must identify the program and funding source that they're going to utilize if they choose to offer amendment. And the new process that we're trying to implement is that will be reviewed by the HR Finance Committee on Tuesday, and a recommendation from HR Finance will be brought to this board on the merits of the amendment that is being offered, and we'll have a recommendation as to the merits of those amendments. So is there any other discussion on Supervisor Longenhahn was next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for Administrator Leonard in regards to budget preparation. This may have been explained in the presentation last month, but I apologize. I either don't recall it or maybe it wasn't brought up at all. But Administrator Leonard, one of the things that we heard in the public comment tonight was the whether or not a program was mandated and whether or not the county is going above and beyond in providing a service to our residents. That, if I recall, was a metric that was used in the priority-based budgeting program. How in this year's budget has the requirement to provide programs, how has that influenced how the budget has been prepared?
Thank you. Priority-based budgeting historically, you're absolutely correct. One of the metrics by which programs are assessed, there's 2 general sets of metrics. One are basic program attributes, and that relates to one of the items you referenced, which is mandate, whether a service is mandated. And then there are another set of metrics, and those are referred to as community results. And those essentially, the combination of those through the process that many of you went through on the county board, through the identification of those those community results and the scoring of those programs that was completed by staff, identified quartiles of programs. Quartile 1 programs were highly correlated with both the basic program attributes and were also highly correlated with community results. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you had quartile 4 programs, which were less correlated to each of those things. Historically, for priority-based budgeting, we have used that internally within departments and asked departments to, over time, migrate or reallocate resources to higher quartile programs within their departments. The extent of the utilization to this point of priority-based budgeting relative to outside of department reallocation of resources, you may recall from last year's budget presentation and Administrator Carger referencing nonprofits, which I also referenced in this year's budget message. We essentially utilize that same framework of basic program attributes and community results to score each of the programs delivered by nonprofit agencies in Marathon County, and that, again, that's referenced in this year's budget message. And we have, the county board, I should say, in last year's budget, did adopt a policy whereby funding would be phased out over a series of years for those nonprofit agencies, at least for a select group of nonprofit agencies. Through last year's budget process, funding was restored to a subset of, I believe, a total of 11 nonprofits. So that has been the extent, unless the county board engages in more discussion relative to those nonprofits. As it relates to outside of across department reallocations, I think that is absolutely an opportunity moving forward for enhancing the ability of the board to make those decisions. And in fact, Deputy Administrator Jason Hake and I have been meeting, and you'll meet Jason later today, but we've been meeting about how to refresh the data within priority-based budgeting and try to get more, make that data more meaningful for the county board moving forward. We realize that is a gap. But that data, the priority-based budgeting system has, you may recall, it has been made available to supervisors through online logins. But again, that data is from 2018, so we certainly need to update that data.
Thank
Okay,
you, Administrator Leonard.
okay. Any other discussion? Supervisor Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. More so a question for the administrator, and I know we had some discussion about this at Public Safety, but we moved on before I had a chance to ask. With OWI court, the DA had mentioned the $165,000. Are we still budgeting $165 this year for the OWI court? And I guess my question is, what are some thoughts on that? Because, and it's my understanding, unless I'm wrong, that as of March 120, there basically is no OWI court.
Very good question, and this was discussed as you referenced at Public Safety. So we are continuing, to your first question, we are continuing to budget the $165,000. In fact, the budget was completed before, quite frankly, I was aware of this change in law. This was a change in law that District Attorney Whetstone identified for our criminal justice stakeholders relatively recently, but it certainly is a significant change moving forward. With respect to funding that program moving forward, it would still be my recommendation to maintain funding. That program itself is a program that, as our Justice Systems Coordinator explained at Public Safety, is generally in excess of a year. It's, I believe the shortest period it can be is 13 months, but you're generally in that 13 to 16 month period of time for an individual to complete. It is an expensive program. We historically had received grants for that to have us implement that program, but those grants have since lapsed. The program really combines intense oversight through court also through the Department of Corrections, as District Attorney Whetstone referenced. It provides housing for individuals who are housing unstable, and it has, again, significant court involvement through both judges, certainly prosecutors, defense attorneys, treatment court professionals, and the like. And over a period of time, those individuals, essentially, the level of oversight is reduced when they're doing well. And it takes, again, generally a year, more than a year, for those individuals to get through. So even now that we're not taking new individuals in to the court, is my understanding, it's still going to be over a year for us to process the individuals that have recently been admitted. And I asked our Justice System Coordinator approximately a week ago or a week or two ago, how many individuals were in that court. And my recollection was that we had 16 people in that court at this time, but I certainly would defer to if Teresa has more updated information on that, but that's my recollection. I don't know if that answers your question or if you had any follow-up.
Yeah, or just a follow-up question. So assuming the law remains as it is, come next budget year, I would assume the 165 is going to be more available than it is now, because the people that are in the system and are allowed legally to stay in the system despite the change in the law are going to be cycling out. And there may be other things we can do with it, but I would assume that a lot of court involvement is just not possible. I don't know how the court is going to be involved if a person's incarcerated.
Correct. That program would have to fundamentally change. And that, in terms of next steps, that was one of the conversations at Public Safety. Right now, that program operates for 5th and 6th offenders. That's who it is focused on. As Teresa explained, that simply cannot continue based on the law, if the law remains the same. The ask I've made of our chief judge, Judge Huber, who's one of our OWI court judges, as well as our Justice System Coordinator, is to have that OWI court team, so judges, prosecutors, treatment professionals, defense attorneys. I think they should bring forward a recommendation as to how to utilize those funds, how they should be reallocated. So I've asked them to look at that, see first and foremost if that program is something that can be redesigned in a way that the justice system stakeholders would prefer, or to your point, if there's some utilization of those funds that is a priority for that group other than OWI court. I think that's a recommendation, certainly from staff based on their expertise. It would be valuable to public safety to consider that, but ultimately, in my assessment, that's a policy decision for the board as to how to allocate those funds. So certainly that's going to be a focus moving forward.
I think the other thing that, that I've at least explained to the board and is that a absolute look at system budgeting. Now, everybody will claim foul because that's what I said up here last year. I said that we needed to look at the judicial system as a whole and find where those resources, where there is opportunity, where there's challenges in the whole system. That includes the district attorney's office, the clerk of court's office, the courts, the sheriff's department, and the jail. And unfortunately, there's something that came along this year that took and preoccupied and added about 1,400 hours to the administrator's workload, and that's a thing called COVID. And on top of that, we did not have a deputy administrator to take up any of that additional workload. And so one of the things that did in fact suffer was a system-wide budgeting understanding and bringing all of the stakeholders, and not just one department, but all of the stakeholders to the table to actually look at where there's opportunities and where there's challenges, and where there may be opportunities to reallocate resources. I encourage, and I have had discussions with the administrator, and we're going to later be introduced to the new deputy administrator, and he has assured me that that is going to be one of the key priorities on the work plan next year. And I think this board, because this board has set priorities on additional items throughout this budget. In previous years, this board has heard from not only the sheriff, but we've heard from each of the chiefs of police from all of the law enforcements throughout this county. And one of the huge safety concerns that is out there was dispatch and the overload that dispatch has had. And this county prioritized, and this county board gave direction and prioritization to staffing that channel full-time. Well, that request also came in this year, and that request was not filled. There was a request for another sheriff, as the budget clearly presents. There was a request from the Sheriff's Department for a detective. That wasn't filled. So I understand and totally support the looking at the opportunities and challenges that the DA's office has in light of an additional court and in light of the body cameras, but doing it in a vacuum and coming up with an amendment to take it out of this program and that program without well thought out is not prudent and is not advisable. But I stand here as the chairman and promise that is going to be the front priority on the next administration plan, and with the assistance of the new deputy administrator, at being able to share some of the workload that the administrator has had, I can almost guarantee that that is going to be brought to the forefront, and there'll be opportunities. And if it is found that in the future there will be an opportunity to amend the budget and look at additional opportunities during the 2021 year. That judge and judgeship in court will not will be elected and take place in August of 2021. The body cameras, even though it's in the budget, they will not probably go operational immediately. And I've had discussions with the sheriff. The sheriff fully supports looking at budgets and in a systematic approach. And I've had a discussion with the judge, in particular, one of the judges, and he also supports looking at a systematic budgeting. So I truly do believe that there is opportunity in the future to look at the challenges and opportunities, including not only the challenges that are in the DA's office, the challenges that are in the Sheriff's Department with the dispatch, the challenges that are in the Treasurer's office. Right now, if you look, the Treasurer's office has a serious backlog of recordings. At one point in the distant past, there was we were 28 days behind in recordings. We had, in this last year's budget, allocated a 0.6 position in the Treasurer's office to be able to record transactions, mortgages, house sales. That was never filled because of COVID, because of the budget repair. And so we're still behind in that department. So there's needs all over this county. And with levy limits and the limits that are imposed upon us, we must have a tool that we utilize to identify priorities and where those are going. So I fully support looking at those moving forward, and would hope that the supervisors would see the wisdom in using those tools. With that, Supervisor Dickinson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two questions. This is something maybe I missed somewhere. One is, what are the budget? So we're being asked if we're going to move money. My question is, how do we know where that money is at? So we have this annual budget. It's not really like a line item kind of budget where you can look at individual items to move. So is that something I'm missing? Is that somewhere that we can look at to say, let's pull that money out of this program or partly from this and move it there? So am I missing that? Is that somewhere? Second question is, how much are we looking at in these positions in the prosecutor's office? What was the amount of money in that would need to be moved in?
Supervisor Dickinson, if you would review the budget message that was presented by the administrator. Normally, the two position requests that were being made by the district attorney's office, if you look at the control point cost, the control point cost for the administrative coordinator, legal secretary, we normally budget staff at the control point, and that includes costs of benefits, is $78,480, and then a district attorney's cost is in that budget also at $99,455. So the two of those added together would be the cost that the request of the DA. Now, as far as the first question you had, you would have to talk to the finance director, Christy Cordes, and she can provide you not only the codes of where the funding is, but also what codes need to be in a budget amendment that would be offered to the finance committee to review. But she could tell you the dollars allocated to those programs. Christy Cordes is recognized, Finance Director. Excuse me, Christy Palmer. Sorry, you got married a few years ago. We can't hear you.
We have the full budget available. It's a very large document, so I can email you after the meeting or tomorrow and get that to you. We have it by line item, so more than happy to do that.
Okay, any other discussion? Any other discussion?
Chairman Gidza, I have a question. This is Commissioner Bizzotto.
Supervisor Bizzotto.
Yeah, so my question is kind of theoretically, if the DA's office is moving more quickly, if they have a greater staff, then cases are moving more quickly, and people may not be incarcerated for as long because their cases are processed more quickly, charges might be dropped, or the plea deals may be cut faster. And so I'm wondering if there's been any sort of cost assessment of what the savings might be to offset a new prosecutor based on the increased speed in cases being processed. Is that something that's been looked at or talked about?
Supervisor Bizzotto, there's multiple challenges in the judicial system because there may be a bottleneck that may be the public defender's office. There may be a bottleneck at the courts as far as scheduling. There may be a bottleneck at the DA's office. So yes, that has been looked at, and that is what the system budgeting would do, is look at all of those opportunities, but also it would identify where those bottlenecks are, where those challenges are, and whether those resources were to be redeployed, where they would be redeployed the best to effectively use the taxpayers' dollars the wisest to make the most efficiencies in the system. So that is one of the advantages of using systematic budgeting, is that you will identify where those bottlenecks are, where those challenges are, where those opportunities are, and where those resources that could be generated in savings, that they can be redeployed to best effectuate a judicial system that works efficiently for the taxpayers. Because again, there's multiple components to it, and so the whole thing needs to be studied. Any other discussion? Supervisor Jacobson.
Yeah, just a question, Mr. Chair. And on the studying, is that largely something that historically or is intended to be done internally or with the assistance of outside resources? That's for my own education.
I will defer that to the administrator. We have not allocated a total resources, but it has been an internal, at this point, up until this point, has been an internal analysis over jail bed days saved and whether or not that the hang up or hold up on a particular case is public defenders. Is there also a challenge within the individual that's charged themselves? So there's multiple things, but initially and historically, that has been looked at by each department and as a system, but it all not externally. We haven't done an external review of that. And I'd invite the administrator to add to that if he chooses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a really great question. I think everyone's identifying the same opportunities that we need to have. We need to find a way to have those conversations as a system. I think Marathon County has done relatively well compared to others. However, there's a lot of room to grow. So much of those conversations, again, are happening internally. However, in the 2019 budget, the county allocated reallocated funds for the purpose of developing an IDEAS program, which is a process improvement program whereby we hired an individual with training and experience in Lean, Six Sigma certified, to come in and really begin having those conversations internally with departments. And in fact, she's working on this individual, Molly Adzik. She's working with the criminal justice system on at least one project related to the imposition and collection of restitution. But we need to find ways to not only look at budgets entirely as a system, but to your point, and I believe Supervisor Bizzotto's point, we need to better recognize how changes being implemented by one department can have a cascading effect throughout a system. So for example, to Supervisor Bizzotto's point, if we can identify within the court system, so through setting goals and targets relative to case processing, identify ways to improve the speed and efficiency with which we process cases, that will have a positive impact on the costs we see and we experience within the Marathon County Jail. And it's referenced in the budget message, our current jail census and how that significantly impacts the budget. But the shortfall of our current budgeting, the manner in which we currently budget, is that all of those savings accrue in the sheriff's office. Now, we have had a group, it's evidence-based decision-making in Marathon County. We've had that group for a number of years that tries to foster that collaboration we originally had monthly meetings. We're now up to quarterly meetings, or down to quarterly meetings. But again, we have the discussions about how to more effectively process cases in the justice system. but what we haven't done is change the way we budget. So I think we need to make headway on both cases. We have put money in the allocated money in the proposed budget before you in the university program. It's a collaboration with UW-Madison. And one of the projects that, several of the projects that we referenced to move forward in that proposal did relate to the justice system. Those would be outside resources to come in and assist us. But that program, there's no guarantee that the University of Wisconsin-Madison is going to identify a particular program of our choosing. They'll identify the programs based on the curriculum that they have in place and their bandwidth to move those forward. So we're having our initial orientation with UW-Madison, I believe in the next week or two, to better understand that program. We were selected to move forward, so that's a positive. But there may be a request from the justice system partners to come forward with, if there are outside resources, we'll have to come and identify those. We haven't identified those resources as of yet.
Okay, any other discussion? Any other discussion? Supervisor Krause.
I would like to suggest, and I'm not thinking of making an amendment, but I know that there was quite a bit of money allocated to the Parks Department for improvements in the recreational area. And I'm thinking that it might be better to look at things that we need that might be more practical and helpful for keeping Marathon County a healthy, safe, and prosperous county in Wisconsin. Thank you.
Supervisor Krause, the one thing that this county and its financial wisdom has never done is tried to use one-time money to fund ongoing operational expenses. The proposal that you're talking about as far as the improvements are part of the capital improvement plan. And that capital improvement plan is one-time money, meaning it is coming from the CIP fund. And so to use those monies to fund position requests means that next year you have already dug yourself into a bigger hole that you don't have the resources coming in to fund that position the following year. So in historic precedent, this board has never used capital funds to pay for ongoing operational expenses. And that is what you would be talking about if you chose to take CIP funds or funds from the improvements for the Parks and Rec Department and reallocate those to the DA's positions or wherever you wish to reallocate them. Because then next year you start with a budget that's already that much further negative than you have for the previous year. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, next Tuesday, again, the Finance Committee will take up any of those budget amendments during its meeting on Tuesday, and then Tuesday evening, the full board will meet and proceed with the budget. And now we'll have education and presentation reports by standing committee chairpersons or designees. Vice Chair McEwen.
Supervisor Pfeiffer.
Vice Chair McEwen first, and then Supervisor Pfeiffer next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a short update on the morgue task force. We recently had a meeting on Tuesday, and the task force accepted and voted on the business plan for the new morgue, And we have a meeting set up, a second meeting set up with Aspirus, and we've met with Marshfield Clinic, and it's been very positive with both of them. So we're moving forward with it, and hopefully we'll have something to report after these next meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Pfifferk was next.
Yes, thank you. The Infrastructure Committee met this morning, and part of our discussion was on a resolution in terms of broadband expansion. I'd like to turn it over to the chair of the Broadband Task Force, Supervisor Robinson, just to give some information on that. I believe we'll have something coming forward at Tuesday's meeting.
Okay, we have Supervisor Robinson's recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Pfifferk and Chair. I'm going to give you a little bit of a report on where the excuse me, Broadband Task Force is. We've had a series of meetings with the internet service providers back in March and September, and we were trying to discuss the Design 9 report that the board heard about in January of this year. And we've been meeting with them in the hopes of preparing for the Public Service Commission's grant application process. There's $24 million that's available for broadband expansion efforts. And we continue to see the critical need for broadband expansion efforts in unserved and underserved areas of the county because of the need for virtual learning, telehealth, telework, and normal communications and research on the internet. The task force has been working with county administration on trying to expand our efforts using the fiber network that we have and expanding it to Hatley, Rothschild, some of the county facilities, solid waste facilities. And we've been, in the last few weeks, engaged in discussions with a number of the internet service providers on how we can expand services to the under and unserved portions of the county. And if you recall, last year, we also had discussions with Frontier, or actually this year, relative to service problems that we were experiencing because of the failing copper landlines, and there were lack of alternatives for cellular and broadband services in many of those areas, leaving those people exposed to public safety concerns. So we've been working with Damon Sweeney at Air Runner, who's looking at a limited approach to potentially expanding services in the Hamburg, Texas, Stettin areas. Been working with Northwood Connects. They've got a proposal in for 5 towers in the northern part of the county. Serenity out of Wittenberg is looking at fiber projects in the Hatley area, laying 7.5 miles of fiber, and seeking county assistance in that. And more recently, we've been working with Bug Tussle, which is a large and growing firm that has provided the largest and most aggressive proposal for us to consider partnering with them as we apply with for a grant with the Public Service Commission. Bug Tussle's proposal is to utilize 10 towers, 7 of which will be new, and they're asking for the county to contribute up to $682,000 toward that. But the committee has been working on trying to develop criteria by which we can evaluate our participation in those, and we're looking to apply that criteria. We've basically taken what the Public Service Commission would apply to grant applications and expanded it to include some of the targeted areas where we're underserved north of Highway 29. And we're also seeking to try to receive service at 50 megabytes down and 10 up. And so with the budget we have in the capital improvement plan allocated $250,000. And we will be bringing forth a resolution on Tuesday through the Infrastructure Committee that would seek to allow the county to move forward and to support a potential grant application for either one or a combination of the internet service providers that meet the criteria that have been set. We have a broadband task force subcommittee that will be meeting tomorrow to evaluate those. We will also be looking at trying to support the efforts in terms of looking at financing Bug Tussle. While they're looking at $682,000, some of that may be in terms of financing, which we could do through a conduit bond at no cost to the taxpayers. We are also looking at what role McDevco can play and other methods of financing could be. So we'll be bringing forth that proposal that will allow us to meet the December 1st deadline and express our support for those grants that, again, meet our criteria and try to address the needs in the unserved and underserved areas. So we'll be happy to provide additional information on Tuesday should you have any questions after reviewing the resolution.
Okay, thank you. Any other announcements?
And Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Robinson.
On a different note, I would just like to bring to the county board's attention that on next Thursday evening, the county board size task force will be holding a public listening session on our work. The committee has been working since June to study what other counties have done, what have been the effects of changing the size of the county board, what is an ideal size of the county board. We will be presenting those findings and laying out 3 different options for discussion we'd like input on. One of those options is to reduce the size of the county board to 27 members, the second to 32, and the third one is to retain the current 38 members. Again, that meeting will be on Thursday of next week in the assembly chambers. We're encouraging people to attend virtually in light of the COVID, but we will have opportunities for them to attend in person. We will be setting up a process by which people can contribute their comments between next Thursday and November 27th. That information will then be taken by the by the county board size task force in developing their final recommendations to the county board. Those recommendations will be presented to the executive committee in December and considered by the board in the early stages of 2021 as part of the census resizing of the board or resizing of the districts. So I encourage you to attend or participate in that meeting next week.
Thank you, Supervisor Robinson. Any other standing committee chairs or designees? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item D, 14B, introduction of the Deputy County Administrator. And I would invite the Administrator, Lance Leonard, to the podium, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you today the new Deputy Administrator, Jason Hake. And before I ask Jason to come up here and say a few words, and you welcome him, I want to talk very briefly about the recruitment that we did, because I do think it gives you some insight into the quality of candidate that we here in Marathon County are able to recruit to come work for this organization. And I think a big part of that is the work of this board, the professional work of this board, and the policy governance approach that it's taken. But the recruitment generally, we did a comprehensive nationwide recruitment for this position, which is different than when I was selected for that position, quite honestly. We advertised in a number of ways to make sure we brought the very best and very brightest to come work on behalf of the people of Marathon County. We were intelligent in that recruitment, very intentional. We advertised within the National Counties Association. We advertised through the International City County Managers Association, the Wisconsin City County Managers Association, and a great many other more traditional methods of recruitment that we've used for positions. Ultimately, through that process, again, I think we developed a very, very talented list of candidates, 55 candidates, in fact. We had a large number of those candidates, again, based on the way that we went about this recruitment, that had county, city, or other municipal administration experience. Again, I can't say thank you enough to all of you as board members, I think you're a very big part of that, based on the way that you govern Marathon County government. We move forward with a screening committee of those 55 candidates, several local business and executive leaders, and ultimately that panel identified 4 highly qualified candidates to move forward through an interview process and a review of work samples from those candidates. We had, and I want to thank the people on that, ultimately on the interview panel, Brian Gumness from the Green Heck Foundation, Ann Herder Rapp from the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point Wausau campus, Yengi Lohr, Ben Bliven from the City of Wausau Police Department, the chief, Supervisor Kelly Gaber, County Board Chair Gibbs, and Molly Adzik from Marathon County. She is the individual I referenced before that oversees our organizational excellence program. At the end of the day, the decision to proceed with hiring Jason was a unanimous decision. He was, again, by far the most qualified candidate. I'm very excited about what he's going to bring to our team. He most recently spent 2.5 years in Lincoln County as their administrative coordinator. Before that, he served in Portage County in their finance department for approximately 8 years. And I think when you look at not only his past experience, but his values and his commitment really aligns well with our values here in Marathon County and our vision of being the healthiest, safest, and most prosperous. Quite honestly, we are very fortunate. Some of the big issues we have to deal with that, again, are mentioned in the budget message. We have to evaluate how to move forward relative to health insurance. Jason did that in previous roles. We have to implement a new enterprise resource planning system and Kayenta replacement. Jason did that in Portage County. And we have, like every county in the state of Wisconsin, significant long-term sustainability issues that we need to confront that we were talking about earlier with the budget. Jason's background in county finance and budgeting is going to really help us in that regard. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you today Jason Hake, the new Deputy County Administrator. He started on the 22nd of October, so I'm sure he feels like he's trying to drink from a fire hose. We're throwing him into a lot. He's working very closely with Christy and Health Department staff and Sheriff's Office staff on our application for route to recovery dollars through the state of Wisconsin. So I'll invite Jason to come on up and say a few words.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard. I'd just like to say that I'm really excited to be here and to join the Marathon County team. I've been here about 2 weeks, as Lance mentioned, and I've received a very warm welcome from everybody. And I'm excited to meet and to work with the county board in the future. There's definitely no shortage of work to go around, so excited to be here.
Well, welcome on behalf of the board and the chair. As the chair, I would like to express my sincere thank you for accepting the position. As you are quite aware, there is no shortage of work. We gave the administrator only 58 things on his work plan for the year, or 60 some, and we kept adding to it all year long. But the expertise that you bring and the skill set that you bring is nothing but an asset to the county and to the taxpayers of Marathon County. So with that, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the board and look forward to working with you in the future. Okay, we will move on to review and education discussion on the proposed items to be voted on Tuesday. Under ordinances, we have from the ERC committee, from the ERC committee, Town of Frankfort rezone, Stacy Van Hoff on behalf of Janice and Larry Brown, ordinance 22-20. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, item E, 15B, Town of Brighton rezone. Tim Vreeland on behalf of Perry Heinrichsen, ordinance 23-20. Any questions on that rezone? Next, we have item E, 15C, Town of Elderon rezone. James and Rose Pop on behalf of Old Boys LLC. Ordinance 20-24-20. Any discussion? Next, we have E, 15D, from the Town of Eau Plaine rezone. Tim Vreeland on behalf of Maple Terra LLC. Ordinance 25-20. Any discussion? Okay, moving on to E, 15E, Town of McMillan rezone. David Lau on behalf of Herbert Lau. Ordinance 26-20. Any discussion? Okay, moving on to item E, 15F, Town of Plover rezone. Jack Kautza and the Jack Kautza Revocable Trust, Ordinance 27-20. Any questions? Seeing none, we will move on to item E, 15G, Town of Knowlton rezone. Sean and Kimberly Montgomery on behalf of J&B Grzinski Enterprises LLC, Ordinance 28-20. Okay, moving on to resolutions. Item E, 16A, County Board of Supervisors. Item E, 16AA, change in supervisory district boundaries resulting from the Village of Edgar annexation. Resolution 63-20. Any discussion? Okay, moving on from Environmental Resources Committee. Item E, 16BA, town approval of the Town of Rib Mountain Local Zoning Ordinance Amendment, Resolution 64-20. Any discussion? Okay, moving on to Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee. Item A is approval of the interdepartmental budget transfers that has been pulled. Item E, 16CB, Budget and Property Tax Levy Resolution. It is, again, the resolution that we just had the public hearing on. From the Environmental Resources Committee and Forestry and Recreation Committee, item E, 16DA, the Marathon County Forest Comprehensive Land Use Plan, Resolution 66-20. And there is a link to that full plan on the agenda, and it can be accessed there. Any discussion? Moving on to item E, 16E from the Health and Human Services Committee. Item E, 16EA, proclaim the third Thursday in November Rural Health Day in Marathon County, Resolution 67-20. Supervisor Butke is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This was passed yesterday at the Health and Human Services Committee unanimously. It basically brings into acknowledgement some of the unique health needs in the rural community, both nationally and at our local level. It coincides with the National Rural Health Day, which is also the third Thursday of November. There's a couple cosmetic changes, however, in the fourth whereas area. The second line, it says Wisconsin Farm Bureau Federation. That was changed in committee to Marathon County Farm Bureau. And then also the UW Extension Cooperative Extension. It's actually the UW-Madison Cooperative Extension now. So those two cosmetic changes should be reflected Tuesday night. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, from the Public Safety Committee. Item E, 16FA, urging the state of Wisconsin to annually allocate funds for the maintenance and upgrade of the public safety answering points, also known as PSAPs, Resolution 68-20. Supervisor Butke, still has your hand up? Okay. Anybody, any other discussion on item E16FA? Again, urging the state of Wisconsin to annually allocate funds to the maintenance and upgrading of the public safety answering point. Okay, under item F, announcements and/or requests. Any announcements? I do have several announcements. First, there's been several supervisors who have asked for and where the minutes from the board-size task force minutes can be found. Those can be found on the website. They're in a folder below the executive committee's minutes. And then also, I've been asked by the Solid Waste Board to remind everyone, and I forwarded an email to all of the supervisors, that November 15th is the American Recycles Day officially, and there is a link to an education presentation about recycling by the solid waste, and so that should be in your email box that was sent out earlier this evening. Any other announcements? Seeing none, next Tuesday, the Finance Committee will be meeting at 4 p.m. and the full board will be meeting at 7 p.m. And so, excuse me, the Finance Committee will be meeting at 3:30 and the full board will be meeting at 7. With that, I would take item F18 and the Vice Chair has moved to adjourn. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Rosenberg. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.